The reason why healing from the ego is necessary is because you cannot deny and accept yourself at the same time. They're both total. You can either accept who you truly are or deny who you truly are. And the denial of self is the ego, right? Is the idea that you created yourself, you know? So it is the denial of God, right? Because your true self is the creation of God. So if your true self is the creation of God and you accept that, it has to be total and full, because you can't accept and deny at the same time. They're both total, right? You either accept yourself or you deny yourself. You either accept God as your creator or accept or deny God as your creator and accept what you created, what you made for yourself, you know? But the ego that we made for ourselves is built on lies, you know? So the ego is the separation from the self. So you can't be in yourself and be in the ego, right? That's what it means to be lukewarm. It doesn't, you can't be lukewarm, not because there is no middle ground. You're either in the ego, in the denial of self, or you're in the acceptance of self, in the seeing through the eyes of God, in the acceptance of your creator, you know? And healing is not about fighting our belief in the ego, right? It's about getting closer to our belief in ourselves, understanding greater and greater our belief in ourselves, right? There's no fight in it because you are who you are. And we're just waking up to that understanding of who we are. So coming into ourselves is coming into greater understanding of the self. And it becomes clear because it is like truly remembering, you know, as you get further and further into the ego, right? Further and further into the ego is further separation. So you start to deny who everybody else is, right? You start to become paranoid. You start to become ill, right? Mental illness is everywhere. Everybody is in a state of mental illness at this point. And it's true. We are in a state of mental illness because we're getting further and further into the ego. There's a greater sense of confusion, greater sense of there's a less and less understanding, right? So actually coming into healing is the opposite of that. You're going into greater and greater understanding. So you're letting go of what is not real, right? When you're in the ego, you go into more confusion because you're going into a state of that is not real, the state that is separated from who you truly are, you know? So to heal is to understand the self, is to come into greater clarity of who we are. And this comes from understanding the love of who we are, right? So, you know, as we're choosing to see beyond the ego, as we're choosing to see beyond the ego in ourselves and everybody else and come into forgiveness and come into understanding, we're letting go of everything else, right? We're letting go of the falseness of the ego, right? Because to hold on to even a piece of it is to be of a split mind, right? And that's to be in confusion. You cannot be healed. Cannot come into healing and still hold on to those pieces of the ego and still hold on to that doubts and still hold on to the idea that we are of our own creation, right? Because that's what fear is. We are protecting the self because we feel that we're alone. We are protecting the self because we feel that we are temporary, right? We don't know, we don't understand of our own immortality. But to live in the grandness and the bigness of our immortality is to understand that the self we have created is meaningless. And as we heal and let go of the ego, we come into our own will, right? Because our own will is one with God, you know? We are the creation of God. So we are like God, right? And we create like God. But we don't know of that creation because we perceive ourselves as separate, right? So to come into oneness with God is to come into our own will, what we truly want for ourselves, or what we can truly do as creations of God. As we hold on to the ego, we hinder our true abilities, right? We side with what's outside of God by forming an alliance with what is not real, you know? So that falseness becomes a distraction to who we truly are, and we can't live within our actuality, you know? So the journey to the self is that commitment to healing, right? And you're continually tested on that. You're continually conditioned and towards that by the Holy Spirit, so that you can become very good at switching back, or very good at what is the ego and what is the true self, right? And focusing solely on the true self and understanding the ego to be false. That's what we're doing. That's what, you know, when we're tested and triggered all the time, that's what we're doing. We're coming back to who we truly are. And the triggers come time and time again until they're no longer triggers, you know, until you're no longer affected by it, because that's when you've learned the lesson. That's when you've gone beyond. That's when true healing comes in, when you don't see those false things as real anymore, when it doesn't have any more power over you, when it doesn't have any more power over your actions and your belief system. The journey is training, but it is a decision of the self, because the will is free, right? So we have the decision to choose whether we're going to live through the ego, right? Or live through the Holy Spirit, through the guidance of the Holy Spirit, which is living through our true self, you know? Because it gets hard, because we're going against the grain, it feels hard constantly, right? It feels hard to live in our true self. It feels hard to be tested constantly over and over again. But that patience within ourselves, when we actually go through it and actually hold on to our allegiance to our own healing, that's when breakthroughs happen. That's when miracles happen. That's when, you know, everything good comes in, and your world transforms and you start seeing things correctly, because you've been patient with yourself. It only seems hard, right? It only seems almost impossible because our perception is messed up, right? Suffering is not of God. Suffering is not is that's something of the ego. So when we become tired, when we feel like we're suffering through these things, right, through our healing process and our healing journey, that's more of the ego, right? The ego wants our allegiance, wants us to be focused on it, right? We are through our journey, right? We are focused on it. We're learning to not focus on it. You know what I'm saying? So the ego is the one that's making us weary of the healing process, you know. And the only way we can get relief from that is by continuing to heal, right? Continuing to go through it and continuing to allow the Holy Spirit in, and allow, when I say allow the Holy Spirit in, I mean allow that helper energy, right? Continuing to improve ourselves, improve our idea of the world, an idea of everybody else in the world, right? An idea of our perception of the world, right? We're continuously doing this despite how heavy it may feel, because it only feels heavy because we're holding on to that ego, right? Our higher selves knows that it's not heavy. If we actually were in our immortality and live through our immortality, we realize that none of this is real, right? None of this has any bearing on who we truly are, you know? If we truly live through ourselves, we would not get tired. We would not get upset at these things, you know? It's all that upset feeling, that uncomfortability, that depressed feeling, that's all a part of the healing process, you know? So that's why it takes patience to be truly with yourself and truly in yourself. That's why it takes dedication, because you'll be deceived at times thinking that it's the healing process that's hurting you, right? When it's actually the ego that we're trying to get away from, the ego that we're trying to heal from, that makes the process feel difficult. You know what I'm saying? It's like when anything heals, right? A cut, a broken bone, anything, you know, that healing process feels, it hurts initially, right? There's that pain there, right? Because the healing is taking place, that change is taking place. So, but allowing that change to take place always brings a better on the other side. You know, God is everywhere and present at all times, right? In us, you know? So God is that sense of peace, that sense of love that never leaves us. It never leaves us. So it's not difficult in itself to get peace and to get love, right? It's our focus on it, right? We can, and our focus requires that faith, right? So we see certain things happening, right? The media is showing us everything. We see things in our life that we perceive as gone wrong, or it's just upside down. We perceive it as so bad, right? But those perceptions are perceptions of the ego. If we can focus on peace, and to do that is by having complete faith, right? So complete faith that you're okay, complete faith that you're safe, complete faith that you're taken care of. And you can go straight into that peace, right? You can reside straight into that peace. And it happens to us sometimes, right? Where we feel good, we feel peaceful, but then we kind of jump out of it when we see things around us going a certain way, right? But to have faith, to live through the higher self, is to have that complete faith, to have that complete faith in God, right? In God that has created us, has given us the choice to have faith, to have peace, to have love, to have goodness, and to see beyond conflict, to see beyond what is not real, right? So everything that is real is right here, right now, within eternity. So it's not hard just because it's hard, because it's somewhere off into the distance. It's hard because our focus, it's a matter of training our focus to stay on that peace, live within that peace, you know, live in faith, you know, and living in faith is setting all your worries, setting everything that you're worried about on God, and having a faith that you can move in the way that you're guided to, you know what I'm saying? Without questioning, without trying to gain control yourself, you know, because it's easy to do that, to you know, try and gain your own control, because we've been doing that, right? We've been feeling like we created ourselves. So we've been feeling like we need to have this complete control over our life. But when we relinquish that control and live within faith, blind faith, and just let things happen, flow with life, you know, things will work out. And I've been seeing like some TikToks of people like, I've been delusional and just going with the flow. That is not delusional, you know, that is the truth, to go with the flow, that you are being guided, that you are being held, that you are being kept, you know. And that's why things have worked out for them. That's why you can hear these people giving their testimony on I did this today and I didn't care and it just happened and this and this and this. And they tell of a cascade of things that happened because they let that faith happen, right? They let their faith guide them, and they weren't worried and they weren't in doubt, you know. They didn't let that doubt, they didn't let that worry block the blessings that naturally come into life, you know. Because that's what happens when we let go. The goodness is allowed to come in, you know. The goodness is allowed to penetrate when we just let go and give it all to God, right? And give it all and lean within our faith and rest within that faith, rest within that peace, you know.